Hello. If anybody is there, please do say hello in the chat. I'm not too sure if I'm actually live or not, as I'm using some new software. And if there's anybody out there, I cannot see you. Not in the software anyway. Well, it's telling me I'm live, so I'm going to have to go with on the assumption that I am indeed live. But if there is somebody there, it would be so helpful if you would just type something into the chat. Let me know. Oh, hi, Darlene. Okay. So is my voice, my sound, is it loud enough? I'm using a completely different microphone. So if you could let me know that the sound is good, that would be good. And I will apologize in advance. My allergies are really acting up, so if I'm sniffing and snuffling, I will hopefully be feeling better for the next time. Happy Easter, by the way. So we're going to start right away. And we'll start as usual. I'm going to go through my sketches from the last couple of weeks since we did our last Sketchy Saturday. So this was our last sketch back on the first, it looks like. Okay, good. Thank you, Darlene. So these are some, given the season, I thought I would do some little bunnies. So just a few little quick sketches of some bunnies, more bunnies. I really enjoyed that one. That was actually more of a scribble, just a little gesture sketch than anything. It took me like literally 1 or 2 minutes, but it was fun. And then I thought, well, okay, I can't do rabbits and not do chickens. It is Easter after all, and where do the eggs come from? So I did a few chickens, and then I decided just to do a few faces. So that was 1 per day there. And then I decided I was missing my landscapes, so I went back into landscapes over the last couple of days. So that brings us for the past couple of weeks, and I'm stuck here, up to today's sketch. So I thought we would do a landscape today. I'm just going to clip this and make sure it stays open. There we go. So you don't have to, but if you want to, you can give yourself a frame using tape. I just use this black washi tape. You can use, I like the washi tape. It's not too sticky, so it doesn't tear my paper. And we are going to be using a lot of graphite powder. Well, some graphite powder for this one. So if you're not familiar with how to make graphite powder, I'll go over it quickly, but I do have another video you can look at on my channel that's the basics of graphite powder, so you can always check there. So I did crop this picture that we're going to be using. I didn't want to I forget exactly what it was. I think there was a person there on a big rock, and I thought, no, we're just gonna go for something simple with this. So for the graphite powder, I think I'm going to so this is my pounce. All this is a piece of cotton with some a piece of old t-shirt, and it's got a couple of cotton balls that are drenched with graphite powder in there, and I will make a video at some time soon, I hope, on how to make a pounce. But for those of you who don't have that, I'm just going to make graphite powder today. You can use I have a little tea strainer here. That's what I usually use if I have to make graphite powder on the fly. You can use an X-Acto blade, and I would normally use an 8B pencil to do my graphite powder because it's nice and dark, but you can use a 6B. Anything harder than a 6B, you're not going to, it's probably not going to look as good as the darker powder, so that's why I use this. So I think first what I'm going to do before we get into the graphite powder, I'll quickly go over the other things that I'm using too. Let's see here. I've just got an HB, an HB, a 4B, and a 4H pencil. I will probably try and stick mostly to the HB and the 4B. Got a little brush, just a little synthetic cheap brush, and that will be used to blend out the sky probably. And I've got an old dirty paper stump to help with blending. So those are really the only things that you need besides either your powder or a way to make your powder. Okay, so we're going to start actually, and the first thing I want to do is I want to get in my horizon line. So hopefully that's given you enough time if you wanted to tape up your page. You don't have to tape it up, but I'm trying to keep a border around my landscape, so that's why I do that. So we're going to put our horizon line about a third of the way up, and it doesn't have to be exact. Actually, I'm going to put it a little bit lower, and I'm just going to draw a straight line across. Oops, lost my tablet. And that's basically where the water is going to be. So all of this will end up being water. I'm going to try, this is my new camera setup, and I'm going to try zooming in, and I'm hoping that it is not blurry. Let me just see, whoopsie, see if I can fix that. There we go. Getting this stuff all set up is, what a challenge. Well, I don't think that's blurry. It's hard for me to see because I'm looking at my screen without my glasses because I can't draw with my glasses on. So there's your horizon line. So once you've got that in, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my pencil and so all of this, I want all of this will be the sky in the mountain area. And I don't care if I get graphite powder on the mountain area. So I'm just going to use my pencil and scrape it against this little tea strainer, which you can see gives me some powder there. So I'm just going to randomly put it across the sky. There's a great big cloud there. So the graphite powder is actually going to give me the blue sky. And I'm not going to worry about down there. So once I've got some powder on, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my brush and I'm just going to tap that powder in. So you can make your sky however you want. You can have tons of clouds by leaving more white space. You can have fewer clouds by putting more of the powder in. If you wanted something very like a hazy look, very well, we'll do that sort of down here actually, so I'll save that for then. But if you wanted more of a smooth sky, you can just go right across with your brush, blending it in. No. Sorry, my mic apparently is very sensitive, so I've been told. So if you hear crunching, I have a Halls. Just trying to keep my nose cleared up while I'm filming. So I apologize for all these funny noises. Okay. So once I've got that, and I can brush this powder right down very, very lightly. I don't want to brush too hard. If I brush too hard, I'm going to leave streaks. So I'm barely, you can already see there's a little streak. I'm barely touching the paper, but I just want to get some of that powder coming down here. And then once it's down here, I've lost my horizon line, but I can see it's right there. So I'll just go across where the horizon is. And the water is going to be mostly light up towards the top, and it's darker more towards the bottom. Oh, that is not my horizon line, sorry. I totally messed that up, didn't I? Sorry, I apologize. My horizon line's down here, so you can bring that rest of the powder down there. And I'm going to go back up here and just take some of this off with my eraser, because that's actually where my mountains are going to be. So I can go back in then with my brush, and I'm just kind of darkening up this area where the mountains will be, just so that I've got a base, a little bit of a base down. And once you've got your sky more or less in, you can brush any excess graphite powder away. And then you can go in with your, either you can keep on working it with your brush if you want to soften it up. And if you want more, if it's not dark enough, you can go back in and add more graphite powder. And if it is too dark or you don't like the way the clouds are looking, you can come in with your kneadable eraser and just tidy it up. Just very softly dabbing and forming some of those clouds. So when the darker your graphite powder in your sky is, the more dramatic your sky is going to look. So you can just fool around with your kneaded eraser. Is that is that clear picture, or is it fuzzy? I'm having trouble seeing it. I'm just gonna check. Put my glasses on. Oh, yeah, it's pretty clear. Okay. Okay, so just keep on coming in. And when you're doing the clouds, you can get an idea of where your sun is. Obviously it would be behind the clouds, and that's where then you can get the direction that your light is coming from. You know, if my sun is kind of right in here is what I'm kind of assuming, which is going to be down almost behind the mountains, and so just putting that in just to give you an idea where the sun is, then that will be all a little bit brighter on this side than it is on the other side. And I want to get rid of this line that I did. So I'm just actually scrubbing my eraser in little kind of circles just to get rid of the line. There we go. Now, and I'm going to get rid of that harsh sun just by going over it. I just wanted to put it in there just so that I have an idea where my light is really coming from. So you can work on your clouds until you're happy with them. Hi, Sue. Hi, Kara. Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you for letting me know. Other than the fact that my voice is very scratchy right now from these allergies, and I'm sniffing. I hope I sound better than I have been sounding. I was so fortunate my son was able to come over and help me get my good camera set up, and I've been practicing using this software all week, so hopefully we won't have any problems. Okay, so once you've got, even if you're not completely happy with your sky, it doesn't matter, because you can always go back in after the fact. So we're going to put in our mountains. And our mountains, looking at the reference, we've got sort of two big kind of humps. So you can do your mountains any way you want. It really doesn't matter. I'm going to more or less follow the reference, and I'm just kind of lightly sketching in a mountain kind of a look. And then this comes down here, and then the other mountain on the other side. Keeping in mind, too, that we're going to have our trees coming up in front of the mountain. So you don't want to do your mountain too high. Keep it reasonably low so that your tree will go up past it. And then this mountain comes down more on a, well, it doesn't come down that gradual, but that's how I made it. And then something in the middle. So mine does not look anything at all like the reference, and that's fine. This is not a, you know, it's just a sketch. I don't care if it looks, I just wanted to do a picture with mountains in it. So that's all that matters to me. If this was a commission where, you know, these mountains were out the back window of somebody's house, then obviously you would have to, and if it was a drawing, you would have to take a lot more care to make sure that you were getting the exact shapes, but that's not what we're doing today. Okay, so then for the mountains, what I'm looking for here is where the darkest parts and the lightest parts are. And I'm taking, sorry, I'm going to take my 4B pencil. It'll show up a little better. And I'm just going to sketch in, and I'm just doing it with back and forth lines like that. And I'm just going to sketch in the shadows. And again, I'm not following the exact form of the shadows or of the mountain. You can really just play with that yourself wherever you feel that the shadows would look best. I'm using very light pressure and just keep going over it to darken it. So actually, if the sun is over here, the darker side should be on the other side. Oh well. Sorry. I'm going to blame the Benadryl on that. For that. Normally speaking, you would look where your light source is. Your shadow would be on the other side. So I should have done my shadow coming down that side. So if it's not too late and you haven't already started, you might want to take that into account. But again, it is just a sketch. We're just having fun and fooling around with the learning how to do a few of the the shadings. But yeah, normally speaking, I might want to have my shadows on the other side. Okay, but since I started on that side, I'm going to keep them all on the same side. So basically, I'm just going lightly in spots, darker in spots, kind of looking at that reference and seeing where the darker spots are. There's not actually a lot of, you know, there's not a whole lot of these harsh lines like this, the dividing the light from the dark. They're much more subtle, so it doesn't have to be. But you're just getting the idea that something that is dark is going to be behind something that is lighter. And you can just basically shade any way you want. Also, depending on the paper that you're using, if you're using a rougher paper, you'll get more of a rougher tone on your paper. If you're using a smoother paper, depending also on how soft your pencil is, this is going to give, the 4B is going to give me a much rougher texture than say the HB will, and I'm using it on its side, which makes it even more textured. I want to have the texture because I'm trying to mimic the feel and texture of rock, basically. So just something kind of like that. And then you can come back in either with your brush, and you can brush that out, or you can come in with these, with your stump. This one's a bit big, So if you have a smaller stump or a Q-tip, you can use a Q-tip. I wonder if I can, I'm going to try zooming in a little bit and hope I don't go too out of focus. So nice to be able to zoom in. Oh my goodness. And there, I think it's in focus. So I'm just using my stump here, and that will give me more of the kind of effect that I want as opposed to the brush, because it gives me harsher, darker lines. So I'm just going over everything that I did with the darker pencil, with the shading of the pencil, and just kind of rubbing it in a little bit to darken it up. And your lighter side, I would give it just a little bit of shading. You don't want it to be starkly white kind of a thing. Like this little area here is pretty white, so I would just come in and very lightly go over it just to give it a little bit more depth. So just something like that. This is all actually going to be behind the tree, but just in case it shows through, you could finish it right down. And then you're going to go over to the other mountain if your stump is dirty enough. So I rarely clean my stumps. I try and keep one end that's kind of pretty clean. It always ends up getting a little bit dirty, and then the other end I never clean it, so that I've got a nice base of graphite there that I can actually draw with. So I'm just I didn't put any pencil down, I'm just using the actual stump. And especially for things that are in the distance, it's kind of nice because it gives you more of a slightly blurred effect depending on how dirty your stump is and how hard you press. So that gives me that side of the mountain, and this side I'm just going to come in and give it a little bit of shading just so that it's not quite so stark. Okay, has anybody got any questions, or am I doing anything that you don't understand? For most of you who've did the sketching with me last year, we did mostly landscapes last year, and I really do enjoy doing these little landscapes. It's hard to keep thinking of new animals to draw, but I will get back to animals. I just wanted a little break, and mostly I also wanted to give anybody who has not done my sketches before just the opportunity to use the graphite powder, which I don't use nearly as much when I'm doing the animals. So every tool sort of has its purpose, and I'm sure that there would be lots of times I could use the graphite powder for animals, but it really works well for the landscapes. Okay, so for this one I'm going to come back in, and I'm going to try and look a little bit more at my reference, see where some of the darks are, and keeping the darks, well, you see on this side now, if your light source is here, my shadows should be on that side, on the side that I did them on that side. So anyway, again, it doesn't really matter because it is just a little sketch. So, but that is something really super important to be aware of when you're doing any art is, number one, where is your light source? Because the lighting affects everything. It affects how you see the texture and everything. So if you're getting your light source wrong, which I freely admit I was going too fast and I wasn't paying much attention, but normally speaking, you would really want to be careful about where your light source is. again, I'm not doing this exact. I'm trying to see on my reference. It does look like that snow on the mountains, so we could go up in and lighten that up a little bit too. So some of these little rocky outcrops are coming right down here to where the lake is. And again, most of this will be covered up with our tree, but we still want to have something in here. Sorry. All right, so then once I've got some shading in, I'll come back in with my stump and soften it up. Move the graphite around. I hope you can see. And you can really just make it up as you go along. You don't have to follow that same reference. You also do not want to end up with a line. Oops, my picture went off. You don't want to end up with a line. You can see this line here. So I want to make sure that the line doesn't actually show, because in real life nothing actually looks outlined. So I don't want to have that outlined, so I'm going to come in here because I do want this to look like it's in front, so I'm going to darken up behind it and just kind of pull that line out so it doesn't look like a line anymore. And that helps to give it some depth. Okay. Am I going at an okay speed for you? Not too fast, not too slow? I hope. Feel free to chat, guys. Otherwise, I feel like I'm just here all by myself. All right. And then once I've got those main shadows in, I think for this one, because it's in the front, I'm going to come in with my brush and just darken up some of those lights just a bit. And I'm using the brush because it's not nearly as harsh as the stump. And yeah, just something like that. Okay, then I'm going to take my kneaded eraser and I'm looking at the, I don't know how well this will turn out, but we'll try it. I'm looking at the mountains where the snow seems to be, and I'm just going to pick out some lighter areas along here where the snow might be. Something like that. Okay. Okay, so that took us down to our horizon line, and so this is crooked. So in the reference photo, actually it is crooked as well, but as much as possible, you want to try and keep your horizon line straight. so that it doesn't look like your mountain is falling off the edge of the world. We don't live in a flat world, and it's not going to fall off the edge of the world, so I just want to make sure that's straight. So I'll fix my lines like that. Okay, now you might want to actually also bring, if you had to fix your line, your horizon line, and make sure that you are bringing your mountain right down to the edge, because it looks like it comes right out of the water. There's no, it doesn't look like there's any trees or anything there in front of it. So we want to have that all right down to the water. And again, I'm going to get rid of that, the outline, just by pulling up the shading a little bit. So just something like that. Oh, that's okay, Kara. I mean, I'm never sure how fast people are, and I think too, people are, anybody who's new to sketching, and this is something that I'm going to try and make I want to make a bunch of videos about different things, but especially in regards to sketching, to me, it's so important that you really not take it seriously. You know, and yes, it's one thing to do a study and to make sure that you're getting, you know, things correct if you're doing a study, to actually study what something looks like. But if you're just sketching to exercise your hand, to try and improve your hand-eye coordination, those kind of things, then it's far more important, I think, anyway, to sketch quickly and a little bit intuitively, without too much regard for what the final product is going to look like. And that's something that's hard to remember to do, even for me, and that's partly why I tape off my drawing, is, you know, everywhere on the net, all the artists out there are posting only their best stuff. So you see somebody post a, quote, sketch, and it looks like a masterpiece. But that's really not what a sketch is supposed to be. A sketch is supposed to be experimenting and having fun, and, you know, the only way you can learn is if you make the mistakes. And so that's why I think it's really important, if you're not able to get something, don't keep going over and over and over it. Just let it go and be satisfied with what it is and get on to the next sketch. And every subsequent sketch then that you do in future, you cannot help but improve. So that's my little lecture for today. Okay, so now I want to come down here and put in the water. And the water, you'll see right below this part of the mountain here. If you look down here in the water is moving. First of all, it's not just a placid, still lake. It's got a current there, or wind, and it's moving. But you can still nevertheless see that all down here, all the way down, and I'm just using my dirty brush, all down here is the reflection of the mountain and or the clouds overhead. It's hard to tell exactly what it is because it's not really got a form. You can only just see that it's darker, okay? And the same thing on the other side, which is hidden behind the tree, but it's quite dark over there too, and my brush is not dirty enough. So what I would suggest is, do I even have a little piece of scrap paper? I can use a Kleenex. So if you have a little piece of scrap paper, you can put it beside you here if you need to get your brush dirtier so that you've got more graphite on your brush. Then you can take your knife or your strainer or whatever it is that you're using to make your graphite. And so the reason that I don't want to put it directly on my paper here is I don't want to get this kind of effect. I want it to be very smooth. Okay, so I need to apply it with the brush, not just put it directly on. So I'm just going to make some powder by scraping my 8B pencil on my strainer. You can use, if you don't have a strainer, you can use an emery board, and that will also chew up your pencil. It gives you a little bit bigger pieces, which is fine. In fact, it maybe even works better. Depends on the results that you want. I wanted a pretty fine powder, but oopsie. Okay, so then once you've got that, then you can come in with your brush and pick up your pencil dust. Try and get it fairly even on both sides. And we're going to come into the lake here, and we're just going to go right across. And you might have to put on several coats depending on, yeah, because this is not, whoops, I lost my picture. So you might have to just keep on picking up. So this is where, and I will show you when I'm finished doing this, I'll just show you the difference. And that's why anybody who works in graphite really should make themselves a pounce, because it's extremely handy. But if you don't have one, you can do it this way. It just takes a little bit of patience and time to build the shadows up. So I want to make sure it's a little bit darker here. Like that. So just keep on applying it until you're happy with the... So if you're looking, this is not a black and white photo, but if I was to do it in black and white, the gray, the darkest gray of the mountain up here is almost the same value as the dark in your shadow of your lake. So you want to get it fairly dark. It's not quite as dark, but you do want to have enough of a shadow there. And again, another kind of a trick is that you always want to go in the direction of your texture. So it doesn't matter if it's water, if it's hair, if it's an apple, if it's a column, a marble column, whatever it is you're working on. Like, you know, the lake goes this way. It doesn't go this way. So you always want to try and keep your strokes going about the same direction as your subject is growing in. Okay. All right. So I will show you. It doesn't matter how dark your lake is. You can keep working on it while I show you. I will just show you quickly here. Using a pounce, how quickly I can get that dark. So where do I want to make sure I don't get it too dark. So you can already see how much quicker that goes. And I don't want to have this light line showing up, so I'm going to go closer to my mountain. I want to make sure I'm coming in from the side and that I have it dark coming down here. And then on the other side, it's dark coming in here. And then depending on what you make your pounce out of, that will give you your either very smooth, like if this was terry cloth, it wouldn't be nearly as smooth. So I used an old, very soft t-shirt for that. And then you can come back in with your little brush and smooth it all out and brush off the powder. So that makes a big difference there. And then I'm just going to look closely at my reference. Then what you can do you need more time to do your water, or should I go ahead, or should I wait? I'm thinking you might still be working on the water. So I'll try and go slowly. So then what I would do is, the lake is more ripply towards this end than it is towards this end. It's a little bit more, well, it's probably just because it's disappearing into the distance, but I'm going to use my Tombow eraser. So just a thin cylindrical type of eraser. If you don't have one of those, you can use your kneaded eraser and just pinch it up into a nice fine thin wedge like that. Is that focused? And you can use the same, get the same kind of it's easier actually with the Tombow, but you can get it with this. So you just want to put in, I'm going to use the Tombow because this one is much harder to use. So along the shoreline here, you just want to have very thin little lines. So it is nice to have the Tombow. I highly recommend that everybody get one of these because they give you certain effects that you just it's harder to get with other tools. But certainly if you don't have one, you can use something else. So I'm just basically putting in the ripples of the water. Okay, good. Just very softly, gently. And the ripples look like they're the lines are longer the closer they are to the shore, and then they get choppier as they come out here. So that's the kind of effect that you want to. And again, make sure that you're keeping your ripples are not going, up like that or down like that. You got to keep them, horizontal, go in the same direction as your water is going. So just something like that. And most of this in the corner here will be covered up with the tree. So just something like that. If you've put your lines in and you're finding that they're too, if your water was very dark and you're finding your lines are just too light, just go over them with your brush and that'll soften them. Just like that. Okay. Okay, so what time are we at? Okay. Now we're going to do our trees. That's always the most fun part. And I'm going to start with the one on, which side will I start on? Maybe I'll start on this side. So this one goes quite a bit above the mountain, and it also goes off the side of the page. So I'm just going to basically start with a straight wiggly line to represent the trunk of the tree. Okay. Now, because we have our mountains so dark and in behind, I am using a 4B. So you do want your trees to pop out. If your mountain is very dark, I feel mine is quite dark, I might go in and lift some of it with my kneaded eraser, just to fade it out a little bit, just a bit, so that the tree shows up a little bit better. Otherwise it'll really blend in. Same thing over here. This is very, very dark where my tree will end up being. So I'm just tapping the kneaded eraser. It's a fantastic tool just to fade things out a little bit. So just something like that. So then once I've got my tree in, I'm going to start about 1/4 of an inch down, and I'm just scribbling back and forth across that midline. And I'm trying to keep the branches pointing up a little bit. I'm leaving a little bit of space in between each one, and each one that I wiggle out like that is going to be just a little bit past the one that's above it. It's just a little scribble, just a little back and forth scribble like that. And as I get down into this, over this mountain, I might have to press a little bit harder. Okay. Yeah, it's really blending into my mountain. But it gives you an idea of how it is that I draw the pine trees. So at some point soon, my branches will start to go off the page on the left-hand side. Okay. They don't have to be evenly spaced. We're going to fill them in, so don't worry about that. I just want them to come all the way down. Okay. So now you could leave it like that, because there are some trees that are pretty thin like that, except I would, if you do leave it like that, I would thicken up the trunk. But I'm going to go in now into the spaces in between and fill those in. Exactly the same way, just a little scribble. Yeah, my mountain's way too dark, it's not showing up. That's okay. So probably in future, I think I used the 4B for back here. Probably in future, when you have something in front of your background like that you really want it to stand out, you could use a much lighter pencil, like a 4H even. Would probably have worked fine for that. So it's just scribbling back and forth. It doesn't have to be even. Make sure that that you're actually taking it off the page, or far enough on the right so that it doesn't look like you're deliberately stopping where your page ends, kind of thing. Okay. And you want to make sure you're far enough out on this side. And then I would come in here with my stump, and I would just very lightly, not pressing too hard, just go over those scribbles, just to sort of soften them. And then if you still have a lot of spaces in between your branches that you don't like, it's not a problem. Just go back in and fill in the spaces with more scribbles. It's sort of almost like a layering process. Right now I'm actually looking for the holes. I'm just going right for the holes, filling them up with scribbles. I'm also at this point refining some of my branch ends so that they're the right length, coming out the right amount of length from the center. Making sure this goes right to the side. Now, if you wanted to, and if you have it, if you have a an electric eraser, so you can try it with the Tombow. So if you wanted to put snow on those branches, you would just come in and erase where the snow would be. And you can use a Tombow. It does work, but it really works well with an electric eraser. So again, that's something that if you work a lot in graphite, it's a great tool to have. So I'm just going to come in here and kind of dot in where I might want some snow on these branches. And if it doesn't turn out, well, then you can just always go back in and cover it up with more graphite. Trying to figure out, you know, the snow goes on the top of the branches, so it's obviously all an illusion. So it's starting to look a little bit like some snow, maybe. And don't forget that there are, even though we didn't draw them in, there are branches coming forward out of the tree towards us. So you can have snow going directly across the center, because that would indicate that there's a branch right coming out towards us. So basically something like that. And then on the other side, for our other tree, I think I'm going to bring it in a little bit because I don't want to go over that. So if you have really dark in the back, you can switch the position of your tree. You don't have to put it right over where you've got it dark. I've got it really dark there, so I'm going to bring it up right down through here. And that way too, I have to make sure that I draw both sides of the tree. So just starting with my line, starting about 1/4 of an inch down, because if you start any higher, you'll end up with a really thick top. It's always it's easy enough to go back in and thicken that if you need to, but to try and make it thinner again is hard. And again, I'm just doing the same thing, going side to side, scribbling side to side. I do kind of tend to use the side of my pencil. I might make this guy a little bit thinner. Let's see. You can also have pine trees sometimes, well, depending on whether they're pine or spruce or all kinds of evergreen trees. The branches can either go up or they can go droop down. So this one is kind of a little bit coming down. The references kind of got both. So I definitely want to thicken it up a little bit at the bottom. You also want to make sure, if you have done a thin tree like this, like I could leave it like that, it would be fine. But if I did, so I will leave it thin like that just to show you, I would have to make sure I come back in here and thicken up the trunk. Make sure the trunk is not just a single little line, because that would not look good. So I just come in and thicken up the trunk just a little bit, make it a bit more obvious, and then I'm going to come back in, continue with my scribbles. so that I get the layers. Even if I'm not going to make it thicker, I still want those layers one on top of the other, just to give it some dimension. Anybody have any questions? Good. Okay. And then the same thing, I'm going to come in here with my stump and just go over everything to kind of blend it out a little bit. I'm just going lightly. I'm not pressing super soft, but I'm not pressing hard. And again, if your mountain is dark like mine in the background, it's hard to make that tree stand out. I mean, I could come in here if I really wanted to, I suppose, with my either a 6 or an 8B pencil. I'll try that and see if it helps. So if I take my 8B, which is no longer sharp, then I can probably get a little bit more. So if your tree is too light, and because your mountains are too dark, sorry, if your tree is doesn't show up against your dark background, you can always use a darker, softer pencil, 6B or an 8B, just to define those branches in front, just so that they stick out just a little, stand out a little bit better. Yeah, it's better. So that all just comes down to knowing the grades of your pencil, knowing which grades are darker and which grades are lighter. And when you're doing layers like this, where you're doing something behind something behind something behind, then it is a good idea to use the different grades of pencil to help you with your values. And again, it doesn't really matter for this because it's just a sketch, so I really don't much care if the tree doesn't completely stand out. But if this was a drawing, I would be very unhappy with it because the mountains are just way too dark. So, you know, but it's a sketch, so I'm not going to worry about it. But it's a good lesson learned, you know, if you're doing things like this and you realize, okay, well, really hard to get the stuff in front to stand out when the stuff in back is just as dark, then that's a good thing to know. Same thing in here, you can go in if you wanted and just pick out a few little spots that are okay. So I think that's it. So are you guys happy with your sketch? Were you able to finish it? Well, I hope so. So normally then I would finish this by just signing it with my initials and dating it. I'll take the tape off. And if you're using a sketchbook, I do advise that you spray your work with a Workable Fixative. I use the Krylon brand Workable Fixative, and that way it doesn't smudge. It won't smudge on this side of my paper. Especially if you're using both sides of your paper, of your sketchbook, because as soon as I close this, if I don't spray it, it'll smudge right onto this page. So I usually do spray my drawings afterwards, just to make sure that they're going to stay in place. Oh, good. I'm so glad, Kara. Your clouds, yeah, clouds need work. Clouds are fun, Sue. I love playing with clouds. So yeah, it's been a while since we've done a landscape. So, you know, just it clouds will really depend too on your paper and on what your brush texture is. And you probably could get a much so if I wanted a much softer effect to my clouds. Like I actually like my clouds. I'm happy enough with them. Some of the parts are a little bit too dark, but that's okay. I don't mind that. So the reason though that they're so so harsh looking, dramatic looking, is because I put the graphite powder directly on the paper. So when you've got your graphite powder going directly on your paper, it's going to give you a much harsher effect. So I'll just show you, I'll just show you here on the top. If I wanted to make clouds that were not quite so dramatic, if I just go in with my brush, it's a very soft brush, and just smudge it around like this, I'm going to get a much, much softer effect. Okay, so you can practice that. You know, make yourself a bunch of little squares and sit with your sketchbook in front of the TV at night and practice making clouds and skies. They're fun. I enjoy doing that. Anyway, thank you guys so much for joining me and for the feedback with letting me know that my sound is good. That's a big help. And my lighting, I think I got that fixed. And so yeah, hopefully we won't have any more issues with sound or lighting going forward. So I hope everybody has a really happy Easter. And I will see you. I won't see you next Saturday. I'm pretty sure, I don't have my calendar in front of me, but I think there's 5 Saturdays in April. So we will be skipping 2, and then I'll be back the 2nd and 4th Saturday in May. Anyway, I'll be sending out my newsletter so you'll know when it is. Okay? Thanks so much, guys. Happy Easter. Bye for now.